everybody, this is Stacy Rossetti, and I am back again with another badass woman investor. I want to introduce Alicia Jarboe. She lives in Massachusetts, and she's going to introduce all the different things that she does that's amazing as a female investor. And introduce yourself, Alicia.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks so much for having me today. I am Alicia Jarboe. I'm in central Massachusetts, and my husband and I run a real estate team out of Keller Williams. We also invest locally, so we have some multis that we're holding. We are in the middle of a flip right now, got some other condos and things like that. So I'm sort of the integrator implementer of the group here, kind of taking care of everything from property management to contracts and leasing and paperwork and listing properties and all that kind of stuff. Less than a decade ago, we lost everything. So we were negative. Our life started out as a negative balance sheet, if you will, to where we are now. And we just bought a single family home for ourselves, which we've been together 16 years and have never had. So it's kind of really cool to see the iteration of nothing to where we are now. We also have a nonprofit, given some of the hardships that we went through. So we have, the business, the investments, the nonprofit, and all that. So yeah, so that's a little bit about us.
Y'all have like a lot going on, it sounds like.
Just a little. We have he's almost 6, so we have a little guy, kind of crazy running around too. So just throw that out there.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, so I totally get it.
Get it, yeah.
That's a lot of work. Okay, so of all the different types of investments that you've done, which are the ones that you like to do the best?
That's a good question. So I think I like to do the flips because it's a little more instant gratification. Like you can finish it, flip it, make a few bucks, right? But I do really like the hold, whether we're holding a condo that's just you take in some rent, you pay a condo fee and like make a little bit of money. And then the multis, like, some of those make a lot of money every month. So it's nice to kind of, a lot is subjective, but even if it's a few grand a month in a building, you're like, okay, like I can make this money and then next month, and it just keeps kind of accruing, knowing that in 30 years or however long that you've refied for or whatever, you'd be done and you'd have all this equity in it. And now your cash flow is even better. So I like those just for the long-term aspect. They make me feel a little bit more secure than like a flip that's like, okay, I'm putting all this money in, like, am I going to sell it? Am I going to get rid of it? So I think that's probably what I prefer.
Yeah. I always tell everybody, like, it's good to balance everything, right?
Yeah,
You're active,
a little bit of everything.
And passive. Yeah. So that way you have money coming in, but at the same time, you have that like steady paycheck that you're going to get like on a regular basis or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. And that's our real estate business would be like our, what do you call it? Like your dinner money, right? Like our life money is really our real estate business where we're helping other people buy and sell and invest and run their numbers and buy again and list for them when they flip and things like that. So that's really a chunk of our money is really just our regular business.
So, I mean, what do you mean? Like they're coming to you and asking you to find property, or like, what is that?
Yeah, so we have a real estate business. So we help people buy, sell, and invest. So we have investors who repeat business with us, who, buy with us and then sell their flips with us or buy investments with us. We help them rent them. So we are licensed real estate agents as well. And then we have, I don't want to say regular people, but your average client who's like, hey, I want to just sell my house and buy something bigger because I had more babies, or, hey, I'm getting older and I want to downsize and I'm so-and-so's parents, or, so we run like I could say like a regular real estate team.
Okay. So you have the real estate, you have like your real estate business or being like a realtor, and then you also have like the investment side as well too.
Yep.
Okay, so tell me like the progression of like how you got to be like such a badass women investor. So what did you start out with, and then where are you at now? Kind of how did it work?
Oh, great. So I was at a high-end millwork and construction company for about 9 years prior to coming into real estate, which is, I think my 5-year anniversary full-time is this month. I was living my life, like had a 9-to-5 kind of thing. And then my husband was in car sales and we made a very conscious decision, like, hey, I'm not going to do car sales anymore. I'm going to go into real estate because not only do I think I can make more money in the long term, and kind of your ceiling is you make what you're willing to put in for effort, essentially. And then we can learn about investing and do all the stuff for ourselves and, make money to invest and things like that. And we made that decision knowing that some of our personal expenses very shortly after doubled. Some of our health insurance, things like that got real expensive. So we cut our income in half. Like we lost an income to start real estate because you don't get paid day one. And we started going through a really hard time and tried to deed in lieu, tried to rent our condo, like the whole bit. the bank, who shall remain nameless at the moment, didn't want to play ball and ended up foreclosing on us. We moved before, the auction or anything like that. I was already coming home to things on the doorknob, and I was like, you know what, I'm not doing this. So we moved out to get a rental. They still ended up selling it later for, I think, what we had given them an offer for, which would have short saled it at the time. And I've never heard this, and I'm in real estate, they actually sued us for the deficiency from the foreclosure. So we had to settle with the bank. So we started out negative. I mean, we kept our cars because, and then paid them off and knew that like we needed to work. So we needed our cars. So then just kind of started building from there. We bought our first
But wait,
investment.
when was that? Like, what year was that?
That was 2013 was when it like officially closed. So it was kind of like 12, 13.
Okay.
Or early 13. So maybe like 11, 12.
I can't believe they were doing that at that time. That's when everybody was like coming back from everything.
Yeah, I have no idea what. I still haven't heard it happen to people. So,
Which
so then
bank was
by,
that?
I think I may tell people for this, but I'm like, I'll just never do business with them.
Yeah, don't talk about the podcast.
Yeah. So summer of 13, we officially were debt free. So we had no car payments, no credit cards. Everything was kind of settled out and done by then. We were renting. And then as soon as we were able to buy our first property, we house hacked, which is the first thing you're allowed to do. You can't buy a straight up investment property for 7 years. But after, I think it was 3 or 4 years, you can buy like an owner occupied multi. So that's what we did first.
What's house hacking, just in case like people don't know what that is? Yeah.
So house hacking is when you buy a multifamily property, a property that you can live in, but also rent out other portions of it. And essentially you're able, because it's your primary residence, able to put down like 3 or 3.5% versus 25-30% as an investor. Mm-hmm. So you're able to do that because it's technically a primary residence. Like I think it's 3 years after. So we did that, bought a 4-unit, pretty much. It wasn't gutted, but it was bad. Like we, redid everything, including like plumbing, stack, kitchens, like, heating systems, the whole bit.
So where did y'all get the money for that?
Well, we actually bought it for a decent price, and then we did a renovation loan, and then we refied out of the renovation loan when we were done. So we only had 3.5, because that was a few years after we were debt free. So by then we were just paying rent and just trying to save up to do that. Okay. And then real estate got better for him after being in it for a little while.
So I mean, like basically what I'm hearing is like, if you don't have any money, this is a great way to go about doing it.
Absolutely.
You started out with no money, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, even if you bought something for say 300, it depends on whose market it is. It's like $10,000 plus closing costs. I mean, that's a lot easier to save than what would you need? 75 grand if you're buying investment property. It's definitely the way to go. I do just urge people. I've had people be like, oh, I'm just going to buy my single family and house hack later. I'm like, no, you're not. Absolutely not. Like if you live in a single family, you are not going to want to downsize and live in your multi. So if you're going to do it, I would do it first. Do it young. Okay. I mean, we had a little kid, and then we were in the 3rd floor, and we just rented out the 1st floor, and we were still living there looking for something else. And we met these great tenants, and they're like, oh, we really want one of the 3 beds. And they're actually just renewed again. So they've been around for quite a while. And we're like, oh man, they'd be great. And he looks at me, he goes, do you just want to move to the studio? And I was like, 450 square feet. We have 2 cats and a 3-year-old. This is going to be fun. So I agreed. I just told him by, my birthday and our son's birthday are in November. I said, by then we have to be somewhere else. And this was just before COVID. So we moved out late October. When COVID happened, we bought a few more multis in the same area and house hacked one of those. So we moved to a 1st floor, and that was less than 6 months before COVID. So that would have been awful, trying to work from home and have a toddler at home and in that small space. So we moved to a different unit, and then we just moved into a single family house a couple months ago. So we were there for a little while also, kind of.
You sound a lot like us too. We downsized. So we lived in a 2,400 square foot house, and then we got rid of everything and moved into a 600 square foot house.
Oh my God.
And we have a daughter. We have a daughter and 3 dogs and my husband. And it was and that 600 square foot house, it was so small. But now we live in an RV. We're travel on an RV. So, but that's a lot like us. Living in a small space is when you're living in it, you're just why am I doing this? But then when you how do you feel now from going from this small living space to this huge living space? Are you just freedom?
A little. It's kind of amazing, right? So there are people who like, might come to my house now and be like, "Oh yeah, it must be nice, right?" And it's like you have no idea what the literal blood, sweat, and tears that you go through to what you have to sacrifice and kind of live below your means and like, get to where you are, and it doesn't just happen overnight. So we came here, we had to get some new stuff, and there's extra rooms and things we didn't have, obviously, but we started putting stuff in like the garage and the basement and here, and he was like, "Where was all this stuff before?" Like we settled in and filled it out much more than I expected for how much stuff was either stored or, we had a couple storage places in the buildings, whether it was like a shed where yard stuff was, or that would go in my garage now, or like, the front area had all these suitcases and boxes and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, they belong somewhere now, but we filled it out much more quickly than I expected. So clearly we've been busting at the seams for a little longer than we thought.
Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that. It feels so good to like, like have a place for your stuff. It's just so nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. So you started out. So you've been house hacking essentially for a while now, and then you finally moved into single family. And are y'all focusing mostly still on multifamily, or what are y'all's like long-term goals?
So long term is to hold the multis that we have. This flip that we're doing right now literally fell in our lap. So that was sort of an unexpected because we closed on it like 2 weeks after we bought our regular house. And I was like, I can't, and a bunch of our rentals either turn over or renew June, July, and August. So I was like, this is a hell of a time to buy a flip. Um, but the long-term plan, I think the long-term plan at this point is we'll sell the flip very shortly, but the longer term plan is either dump some money. We know a bunch of people with either syndications or funds and things like that. So we might diversify a little bit more and be like, here, take this chunk of money and just give me a little more money back. Be a little bit more passive with some of those investments. If the right deal came along, multis are just stupid money right now where we are. The numbers just don't make sense, I guess, unless you're living in it or trying to reduce your rent or something like that. But as a straight investment, they're really difficult to make work right now.
Where do y'all invest at in Massachusetts? Like which areas?
Worcester, Massachusetts. So it's about an hour west of Boston.
Okay. Okay. All right, cool. So
It's a major
crazy,
city.
Is it
Yep.
crazy market there right now or?
It's crazy. It's calmed down slightly with summer, a little bit mix of, I think, buyer fatigue, vacations, things like that. So some of the open houses are, not crazy lines, or you're in multiple offer situations, but maybe not as insane. I've gotten a couple offers accepted lately for people that were like at asking with a real home inspection. And that was not something we could do a few months ago. So, but I submitted an offer for someone yesterday for like 70 over ask, and like he still didn't get it. So it kind of still depends on the neighborhoods and how much inventory is in those neighborhoods and stuff. So it still really is crazy. And the multi-market here is honestly just stupid. Like the numbers are stupid. So the longer term plan for us will be, like I said, that passive. If we can get our hands on something like industrial or commercial where you own it, but again, like some of the management is much more passive than like owning a multi where someone's calling you about the sink leaking or something like that. I think that would sort of be next for us too.
Well, that's what I do. I do storage facilities.
Oh, yep.
That's what we do. We own storage. If you want some, so I tell everybody, the lazier I get, I mean, the more I invest, the lazier I get. Right. And it's like
Yep.
storage is like, you're just so lazy. So we travel. That's why we live in an RV. We travel all the time. So you should really look into some storage
Yep.
stuff. Except for it's going to be a little bit more expensive up where you're at. I have a couple of students up in the Northeast, and it's going to be cheaper than multifamily, but the cap rates are going to be higher than multifamily cap rates. But yeah, you should look into that. That'd be good. All right. So tell me a little bit about like, what does your company look like? Is it just you and your husband managing everything and doing everything, or how does your team look like?
So it is right now. We have an admin who's our transaction coordinator for our business, who also, if I'm like, hey, go scan this, send this out, like, some little stuff like that I have to take care of on property management. He is running numbers and looking for deals, and I'm doing contracts, writing leases, listing properties, and pretty much everything that like an integrator would do to make it happen. Like he's like got the big ideas and, hey, let's do this thing. And I'm like, okay, but now I got to call the dumpster guy, and I gotta, I had to have him go pick that up this afternoon, and then, call this person. He's talking to a painter right now, but I'm like, I can't do that right now. So it takes a little bit of everything. So it mostly is the two of us. he does the majority of our listings. I'm handling a lot of our buyers for, our regular business. So it's kind of a mix. It's hard to say. Someone asked me, I think, like how your time blocking of your day looks. And I'm like, dude, I'm a big like checklist kind of person. I'm like, I got these 5 things that have to get done today. And then if the emails, if other responses, if I can get to that stuff, it gets done. But like tomorrow, I'm like, okay, my studio, my furnished studio, I need to write a new lease for that. So I'm like, okay, that's something I have to do tomorrow that can't move off tomorrow. So I kind of just deal with it as it comes, but it's a lot of details. It's a lot of just like, I would say very task based, just because it's like, hey, do this thing. And it's not something that's like 6 months from now that needs to get done. It's like, it's today, it's tomorrow, it's this week kind of
You're
stuff.
just putting out fires is what you're doing.
Yeah.
So are y'all doing Airbnb too? Like you said a furnished apartment or whatever. So what's that?
We have one. So that studio that we were in briefly, he was like, again, with the big ideas, was like, hey, let's furnish it. And I was like, oh man, I don't really want to spend all this money to furnish something. Like I have no idea what the furnished market even is where we are, but some of the properties are in between 2 major hospitals. And so we get residents, a few of our tenants are even like students and things like that, working on PhD degrees, all that kind of stuff. And so we furnished a studio right after we moved out, had people there, I think, for Thanksgiving after we were gone, and then have some traveling nurses and things like that stay a few months at a time. So, we Airbnb in between, but last year we had 2 nurses for most of the year, like kind of half and half. And then the week and a half in between, we Airbnb every night but one. And then I think we just didn't for Christmas Eve because she moved out right before someone else moved in after New Year's. So I think we had maybe 2 nights of vacancy last year. And that's 450 square foot studio made me more money in 2020 than my 3 beds.
Are you serious? So yeah, I was going to ask, like, are you making money on that thing? And how much do you rent? Like, what's the typical price out there for like a studio for a night?
Someone asked if there was rentals for like, I don't know, they had like $1,000 or something. And I was like, none of my stuff's like that. So I was like, I pulled MLS out of my curiosity and I was like, the cheapest rental in Worcester at the time when I looked a few weeks ago, didn't matter what I pulled for criteria, was like 1,300. So, I mean, and that, I don't know if that was a studio or not, it was probably a 1 bed. Depends what kind of building and where in the city, depends a lot. All of our stuff's between like 15 and 17. That studio is 1875 furnished and they pick up the electric. So it's, yeah, I mean, they pay it because they're traveling nurses. They don't want to bring all their stuff. They're coming from Carolina or Minnesota or wherever they're coming from. So, yeah, it works out. I mean, I just pay water and sewer on that building and they're pretty easy going because there's nothing to fix, right? It's all their furniture. It's all my furniture. It's,
Do you do have like a minimum like stay or something for them, or is it? Yeah.
I mean, if I write a lease for someone staying and it's kind of taken off the Airbnb platform, like 30 days would be probably the minimum to do that. But when it's available, like someone could just go on Airbnb and book a night.
Okay.
So there isn't really, there'd be a minimum to write a lease versus like just keeping them at the Airbnb rate. Because the Airbnb rate, I think, would get, I don't know, it's like 100 a night or something. So it's more if someone were to book a couple weeks there versus me pulling them out and paying half of the month.
Is that like something that y'all are interested in doing more of, or are you just like, no, this one is enough?
We've talked about it, and we talked about doing it to one of our first floor units. And then I was a little weary about having like lease tenants where they were coming in the same door, like an Airbnb person, like one night at a time had access to the building, where that unit that we have its door opens out onto the street separately from the main door to the building. So, an Airbnb one night person can't get into the building where people have leases. And I think that was my weird brain of like security issues of like, we have a one-off one night, different person the next night, different person the next night. Like, does all these people have a door code? Do all these people get into the building? So I think it's an option at some point. I think some of the buildings that we have condos in or have had condos in have restrictions against that. So even though they'd be great spaces for it, they have requirements on landlords. You have to have like 1-year leases or 6-month minimum kind of thing. So if we did it like that, we'd have to like really backlog furnished finder or, long-term nurses versus using Airbnb as the platform.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So like, do you have any, like, for all the people that are listening, especially the women that are listening, like what are some, what would be like some advice that you would give, like for first time, like people trying to get into, to investing, especially as a female?
I don't know if I have any female specific advice. I know house hacking would be one of them. Like we talked about, not having a lot of money up front to put towards properties. It's a really great place to start and gives you a place to live for free. I think kind of worst case scenario, you might have to pay a couple $100 a month depending on what kind of property you buy, but generally maybe you make a couple $100 a month pays for your electric bill or something. Other advice. So sometimes it really is just about, I hate the word sacrificing, but sacrificing or like living below your means. And when all your friends want to go out drinking on a Friday night, you say no, because that $50 you could put towards something else. You can save it towards something. And making those decisions is really, really hard. And it's a lot easier to say than do. And I can say that from experience, and give advice on like what not to do and how not to go through that. But I, appreciate that experience as part of who we are now. Other advice for first timers. I mean, if you're in real estate, it's a really great way to learn. If you know investors, even shadowing them, whether they're going on inspections or showing, things like that, just to kind of get to know them a little bit more and get to know what they're looking for and what they're not looking for. Mm-hmm. We have some calculators, but I think there's some online too about rate of returns and IRR and how much flip money you have left and things like that to see if deals even make sense. There's some basic calculators for like 1% rules and stuff like that. So get familiar with numbers. I wouldn't really recommend ever overpaying, which is why we're not buying right now. I guess the only time that would make sense is if you plan to refi later or live in it for free. So that's some of my pretty, basic advice on just get to know it, get your feet wet. If you don't get in it and you don't talk about it, you don't listen to it, you're just probably just not going to do it.
Were you like a realtor first and then investor, or an investor then a realtor? How did that work out?
Oh, I'm thinking the time on. I had my license for a couple years before I came over full time, and we bought our first property. Well, I'm trying to think of the time. And so it's 5 years now that I've been in real estate full time. My kid will be 6. So he was about 9 months old when I came over full time, and I had my real estate license for a couple years before that. And we bought our first property when he was a year and a half or something, okay. Maybe a year and a half. So we were definitely, I had a license before I think I had a license before we bought, and he was in real estate before we bought the property. So we definitely didn't do it prior to that.
You recommend people getting their license? Does that help nowadays, or is it like you don't really?
I mean, it does if you're gonna sell other stuff too, unless you plan on doing a lot of flips or selling it yourself. I mean, you'd save that commission to a listing agent. You're still paying a buyer's agent to bring a buyer, but if you plan on flipping a bunch and listing a bunch of properties, it might make sense for you to get your license just to avoid some of that commission. You just have to disclose like, hey, I'm a partial owner, or I have owner interest, or, something like that in the property. I'd recommend that if you're going to do a lot of it. If you have a realtor that you work with all the time, that you'd prefer to just do it and save yourself the fees because you have to pay an office, you have to pay MLS, you have to do that kind of stuff to collect any money and to list. So unless you're going to do it a ton, it's probably not a great idea. But if you're going to flip a bunch and you'd rather just kind of be a for sale by owner but have a license behind you, it would make a good amount of sense.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I appreciate it, Alicia.
Yeah, thank you.
So how can people get a hold of you, contact you? Can you give them some information about that before we leave?
Yeah, so really easy to connect with. So if you went on our website, thejarbogroup.com, there's a contact page on there. I think the main phone number is on there, which so kind of didn't matter which way you emailed or text or filled out a form submission, even on our nonprofit website, thejarbofoundation.org. Any of those ways, like 99% of them, I'm either going to get on my phone or be able to see when I'm at a computer. It kind of doesn't matter who they go to. So every now and then our transaction coordinator gets an email or Justin's main inbox or the phone number. And I'm like, I see them all anyway. So I just tell people, like, whatever way you want to reach out, I'll find it. I'm on Facebook. Our business is on Facebook. Our nonprofits on Facebook. Our business on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. So there's a ton of ways to find me.
Okay. So jarbogroup.com.
The Jarbo Group. Yep.
Okay. So thejarbogroup.com. Okay. Awesome. Cool. Yep. Well, thank you for coming and talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, everybody, take care, and I will see you guys at the next video. All right, and make sure you check out RentRedi for me, please. They are the sponsors and the hosts of this. So just go to rentredi.com, and they are a property management software. So let them, if you have properties, let them help you manage the properties. Okay. All right, take care, everybody. All right, bye.